Hello, it's week 11 of season 5 of the Andy Griffith Show. This week's episode title is The Pageant. Martin, tell us what's going on in the pageant.
Well, we got the Nader Centennial coming up, and Ulti wants to know what the word centennial means. And I tell him, you see, Ult, the word centennial comes from the Latin word centus, which in the Latin language means 100. You see, the Latin language was a language spoken by very intelligent people a very long time ago. And whenever they wanted to say 100, well, they just said centus instead. For the occasion of the Nader Centennial, our choir director, Mr. Nesters, is putting on a pageant.
And Andy asks you whether you're going to try out for a part in the pageant. You say, yeah, for a speaking part, because you've got speech training. And Andy says, you've got speech training?
And I say, well, yes, you remember, from Eleanor Toltis, my voice teacher. She's the one I really give all my credit to today for my diction. And then Aunt B comes in. She says she's not going to try out for the pageant because she's sure Mr. Nesters will choose Clara Edwards again as Lady Nader. Aunt D is going to do the sewing instead. And then Ulti goes home with Aunt D. They're going to make brownies. And then while the brownies are cooking, Aunt D shows Ulti a scrapbook of pictures from where she was in a church play a long time ago. And then she starts reconsidering. Maybe she could try out for the part of Lady Nader.
So she goes to the tryouts, but before she can say she wants to try out for that part, Mr. Masters says he's chosen Clara for the part again, and he's sure that Aunt B can sew a good costume for her again this year.
But then Clara has to drop out because her sister in another town is sick just 2 weeks before opening night. And Aunt D tries to hint that she could do it, and then Andy gets the hint, and he suggests to me and Mr. Nesters that Aunt D take the tart. And I say, yeah, it may just be the answer. And Aunt D says she can do it. And I say, well, it's Good Day Kitchen. Hello, Broadway. So they mention Aunt D in the local theater and say she has acting experience from West Virginia in the 1920s. And we start rehearsals. I've got the part of Nugatuck, an Indian, and Andy plays James Merriweather, a settler, and we revise one of my lines, and then Aunt D takes the stage to rehearse her part.
But she's awful at acting. She mispronounces names, she forgets words, she overdoes the gestures, and Mr. Masters tells you and Andy later in the courthouse that she's got to go.
And I say, well, John, you've got to give her a chance. I did even text Ritter, didn't hit it right the first time out, but he says no. So Andy says he'll tell her. And he goes home, and Aunt D is practicing, and she says she doesn't care for Mr. Nestor's directing. And Andy says, well, why don't you give up the tart then? If it's not something you're going to feel good about. And Aunt D says she wouldn't give up the tart for anything in the world. And then she goes off to practice. Says she won't have time to cook supper, and probably won't for the next 2 weeks. And Andy didn't have a chance to break the bad news to her.
And then Andy gets a call from Mr. Masters saying Clara's back in town and that she can do the part after all. And Andy says he hasn't told Aunt B yet, and he asks Mr. Masters not to tell Clara about the part until Andy can figure something out.
And then Andy gets an idea. He asks Clara to come over and help out with the housework while Aunt D is busy with the pageant. So Clara comes before Dee leaves the house to do errands for her costumes and such, and she tells Andy and Ulti that she'll cook a pie every night while she's here and while Aunt D is gone. And she tells Aunt D that she's happy that Dee got the tart. And Clara starts reminiscing about when she played that tart, and she starts reciting the lines beautifully.
And then B goes off to play practice, but then comes back and gives the part to Clara. She even tells Andy later that Clara's a better actress. And so Andy's plan worked.
And then Andy and I see Clara at rehearsal. She does real well. And I tell Andy, well, that's the difference between night and day, isn't it? Aunt D tried, but it's just one of them things. You either got it or you don't. And then I see that Mr. Nesters gave my part to somebody else. And I yell, what's that person doing wearing my headdress? Hey, fella, that's my headdress. I know there are a few rough edges in my performance, but we got 2 weeks yet. Now I know I can do this tort. I feel Nugatuk. Nugatuk is me.
We'll see you next week for episode 12.